The Romans built roads that still exist today. The British created borders that still cause wars. But here's what historians won't tell you about which empire actually shaped our world more, and why their influence runs deeper than any textbook would have you believe. Most people think the Roman Empire was the greatest in history. They're wrong. Dead wrong. And I'm about to show you why everything you thought you knew about empires needs a complete rethink. What you'll learn today isn't just going to change how you see history. It's going to change how you understand the modern world. Today we're settling the biggest question in human history: Rome or Britain? Two titans of conquest that changed everything. But only one can be crowned the true master of influence. And trust me, the answer isn't what you expect. By the end of this video, you'll understand why these empires matter more today than ever before. Let's start with something mind-blowing. At their peaks, both empires controlled about a quarter of the world's population. But that's where the similarities end. One built in stone and concrete, the other in ideas and institutions. One lasted centuries. The other created systems that outlived its official existence. Picture Rome in its glory days. The year is 117 AD. Emperor Trajan stands at the head of an empire stretching from Britain to Egypt, from Spain to Iraq. This wasn't just big, it was revolutionary. They've got massive stone buildings, heated floors, and plumbing systems so good that some still work today. Pretty impressive for people who thought gladiator blood could cure epilepsy. And speaking of impressive, let's talk about those Roman roads. 250,000 miles of them. That's enough to circle Earth 10 times. But here's what most people don't know. These weren't just paths connecting point A to point B. Each road was an engineering marvel, built with up to 7 distinct layers. The bottom layer, massive foundation stones. Then came layers of crushed rock, gravel, and sand, all precisely arranged to allow proper drainage. The surface, tightly fitted stone blocks, slightly curved to let rainwater run off. These roads were so well built that they're still visible from space. Yes, you heard that right. From space. Modern satellite imagery can track Roman roads across Europe because they were built so perfectly straight and so durably that they've left permanent marks on the landscape. Try finding a modern highway that makes that kind of impact. Think about this. Roman roads were built with such precision that they only dropped by 1 inch for every 100 feet to allow proper drainage. They included rest stops every 20 to 30 miles. Exactly the distance a Roman legion could march in a day. They even had stone mile markers telling travelers the distance to Rome, no matter where they were in the empire. This wasn't just infrastructure. It was a statement of power and engineering brilliance. But here's where it gets really interesting. The Romans didn't just build roads. They built an entire system of civilization that we still use today. That number you see on the Super Bowl. Roman numerals. The reason we have 12 months. The Roman calendar. The words you're using right now. About 60% of English words have Latin roots. Their influence goes even deeper than you might realize. Ever been to court? That legal system comes from Roman law. The concept of citizenship. Roman. The architecture of government buildings across the world, based on Roman designs. Even the way we think about urban planning, with city grids, public spaces, and sewage systems. That's all Roman innovation. Now, let's jump forward about 1,000 years to meet an empire that would take these foundations and build something even bigger. By 1920, the British Empire controlled 24% of Earth's land surface. The empire on which the sun never sets wasn't just a cute nickname. It was literally true. The British Empire was so vast that it was always daytime somewhere in their territory. From Canada to Australia, from India to South Africa, the British flag flew over territories covering every time zone on Earth. But here's what makes the British Empire different. They didn't just conquer land. They rewrote the rules of the entire world. The language we're using right now. English became global because of British colonialism. The lines on your map, most were drawn by British officials, sometimes with nothing more than a ruler and a pen. Those straight lines you see cutting across Africa. That's what happens when someone in London decides to divide up continents, without considering local geography or ethnic groups. In fact, let me show you something that'll blow your mind. 90% of the world's current international borders were influenced by British decisions. They literally shaped the modern world map. And it wasn't just about drawing lines. They created entire countries. Ever wonder why India and Pakistan are separate nations? Or why the Middle East looks the way it does? That's all British handiwork, for better or worse. Industrial Revolution wasn't just Britain's gift to the world. It was a transformation powered by colonial resources. Let me break this down. Britain didn't just take raw materials from its colonies. It restructured entire economies. India went from producing 25% of the world's textiles in 1750 to less than 2% by 1900. The British didn't just build factories. They dismantled competing industries across their empire to create a global system that fed their industrial machine. Let's talk about how deep this transformation went. Before the British Industrial Revolution, it took about 250 hours to spin 1 pound of cotton into yarn. After their innovations, just 2.5 hours. They didn't just make things faster, they changed how everything was made. Everywhere. Take tea. Seemingly innocent. Right, wrong. This is where we see the British Empire at its most cunning. They were buying so much tea from China that they were running out of silver to pay for it. Their solution: start an illegal drug trade with opium, get millions of Chinese addicted, then use the profits to buy tea. But that wasn't enough. They sent a spy, Robert Fortune, disguised as a Chinese merchant to steal tea plants and growing secrets. He smuggled out 20,000 plants and established tea plantations in India. Today's $200 billion global tea industry exists because of this corporate cloak and dagger activity. Sports. That's another fascinating story. The British didn't just spread games. They spread an entire culture of organized competition. Soccer's rules were standardized in a London pub in 1863. The first international soccer match, England versus Scotland in 1872. They created the concept of international sports competitions. The dimension of a tennis court, the height of a cricket pitch, the shape of a rugby ball, all standardized by British imperial influence. But here's where things get really interesting. The British Empire's greatest legacy isn't something you can touch. It's the invisible systems that run our world. The modern banking system, created to fund colonial trade. The Bank of England, founded in 1694, became the model for central banks worldwide. The first stock market boom, trading in East India Company shares. Time zone. Before the British Empire, every city had its own local time based on the sun. But when you're running trains across India and ships across oceans, you need standardization. Greenwich Mean Time became the global standard, not because it was scientifically special, but because Britain ruled the waves. Compare this to Roman influence. Yes, Roman law is the foundation of Western legal systems. Their architecture inspired countless government buildings. But British influence, it's in the software of modern life. Every time you use paper money, that's a British innovation. When you buy stocks, you're using a system invented in London coffee houses. The United Nations didn't just grow from the British Commonwealth. It was literally designed based on British imperial management techniques. The Security Council, inspired by how Britain managed colonial conflicts. International law. When countries today argue about maritime boundaries, they're using concepts developed by British Admiralty courts. The scale of English language dominance is mind-boggling. In 117 AD, the Roman Empire had about 60 million subjects. Today, over 2 billion people speak English. There are more English speakers in China than in the United States. More people learn English in Japan than study Japanese in the rest of the world. The British didn't just build physical infrastructure like the Romans. They built mental infrastructure. The concept of GDP, British economists. The idea of developing versus developed nations. British imperial categorization. Even the way we divide the world into first world and third world comes from British imperial thinking. Look at education. Roman schools taught rhetoric and law, but the British created the modern university system. Oxford and Cambridge became the models for institutions worldwide. Standardized testing. That started with British civil service exams in India. The whole idea of teaching in English to prepare for a global economy. That's British imperial policy becoming global standard. Even our concept of citizenship changed. Roman citizenship was about legal rights within the empire. British ideas about citizenship, voting rights, and parliamentary representation shaped modern democracy. The Magna Carta's influence extends far beyond England. It has been cited in court cases from New Zealand to India to Canada. In the transformation from medieval to modern society, the British Empire was the catalyst. They didn't just participate in the change. They engineered it, exported it, and enforced it across a quarter of the globe. And unlike Roman influence, which was largely confined to Europe and the Mediterranean, British influence was truly global, something mind-blowing. When we talk about the size of these empires, we're dealing with numbers that are hard to grasp. The Roman Empire controlled about 2 million square miles at its peak. The British Empire, 13.7 million square miles. That's nearly 7 times larger. To put this in perspective, The Roman Empire was about the size of the continental United States. The British Empire. It was larger than the entire continent of Africa. The Romans connected Europe, North Africa, and the Middle East through their network of roads and sea routes. But the British, they connected Sydney to Singapore, Vancouver to Cape Town, Delhi to Dublin. They created shipping routes that are still used today. The Suez Canal, built under British influence. The Port of Singapore, British foundation. The Panama Canal, while American built, it was conceived based on British imperial needs. Consider this. In Roman times, it took months to send a message from one end of the empire to the other. By the late British Empire, they had laid submarine cables across every ocean. The first global communication network wasn't the internet. It was the British telegraph system. By 1900, Britain controlled 2/3 of the world's telegraph cables. This network was so crucial that it's still the foundation of where many modern internet cables run today. But size is not everything. The real difference is in how they shaped the future. The Roman Empire created a template for Western civilization. Law codes, architectural styles, governmental systems. The British Empire, they created the template for how the entire world interacts. International trade agreements, based on British imperial trade practices. The concept of national sovereignty, shaped by how Britain granted independence to its colonies. Think about banking. Every time you use an ATM in Tokyo, transfer money to Sydney, or trade stocks in New York, you're using systems first developed in London. The entire concept of international finance, from letters of credit to insurance markets, was standardized by British imperial trade needs. The Romans gave us the idea of empire itself. Unity under one law, one ruler, one system. Pax Romana meant peace through Roman dominance. But the British gave us something different. A world of independent nations connected by trade, technology, and common standards. Pax Britannica wasn't about direct rule. It was about creating a system where Britain could influence without controlling. The impact on technology is staggering. The Industrial Revolution spread through British imperial networks. The standardization of everything from screw threads to railroad gauges happened because British engineers were building infrastructure across the globe. Even the way we measure things. The imperial system spread worldwide through British trade. So who had the greatest influence? Here's my controversial take. While the Roman Empire laid the foundation for Western civilization, the British Empire created our modern global civilization. The Romans shaped how we build society, governments, laws, architecture. The British shaped how the entire world works together. Trade, communication, finance, international relations. Think of it this way. The Roman Empire is like your operating system. It's fundamental, but mostly invisible. The British Empire is like your apps, your internet, your whole digital life. It's the active, living structure of our global world. Every time you check exchange rates, book an international flight, every time you watch or follow international news, you're engaging with British imperial legacies. The British Empire's influence on global culture runs deep. The spread of English created something unprecedented, a truly global language that belongs to everyone. Today, there are more English speakers in India than in England. More people learn English in China than there are Americans. English isn't just a language anymore, it's the operating system of global communication. In the end, both empires were built on conquest, exploitation, and the belief in their own superiority. The Romans had slaves. The British had colonies. Both caused immense suffering. But their influence. The British Empire wins. Not because it was better or more moral, but because it created the very system we still live in today. The Roman Empire is history. The British Empire's influence is still making history. Next time you check your phone, remember, you're reading English text, checking GMT-based time, probably using a device made in a former British colony, running on industrial-age technology. The microchips might be made in Taiwan, assembled in China, designed in California. But this global supply chain, that's a British imperial legacy. The container ships carrying these products, the insurance covering the cargo. Probably from a company tracing its roots to Lloyd's of London. That's not Roman influence. That's British influence. Alive and kicking in the 21st century. From the language of global business to the time zones we use. From international law to global trade networks. The British Empire didn't just build an empire. It built the modern world. Think about that next time someone tells you the Roman Empire was the greatest in history. Like and subscribe for more historical deep dives. They'll change how you see the world.